how to avoid spousal support. So how to avoid spousal support or alimony in your divorce case. So we get this question, and there are definitely some strategies you can use to avoid paying spousal support in your divorce. And I want to talk about some of that with you today. So spousal support, alimony, first of all, those are the same thing. They're synonymous. The statute in Michigan refers to it as spousal support. Alimony is more of a street term, generic term for it. In other states, they call it that. It's the same thing. So alimony, spousal support, same thing, first of all. So what is alimony, first of all, based on what Michigan law is? So alimony is a payment that you make to your spouse based on a divorce. So you're getting divorced, you make more money than your wife does, and you've been married long enough and you meet some of the other factors. There's these 12 factors that they look at, and then you're paying alimony or spousal support. So in other words, you're required to pay monthly payments to your wife after the divorce for some period of time. It's kind of like child support for adults, basically. You're making a monthly payment based on a formula. With child support, there's definitely a formula. The way they do it in Michigan, we plug in incomes and we know how many overnights you have, and we can calculate a number. We know what your child support is. Spousal support, not that simple. There's certainly software you can use to calculate alimony or spousal support, but it's not, no one's bound by that. The software, the results of that software is not even admissible in evidence in court. So you're not going to just run a program, a computer program, and get a result, and then that's what you pay for alimony. So it's different from child support in the way that it's calculated, first of all, because you're not going to just run a program and get a number, which is how child support works. So but basically, it's based on these 12 different factors under Michigan law. They look at what you make, what your wife makes, how many kids you had, is there any child support? Because if there's child support, that has to be calculated first. There's really no even looking at alimony or spousal support until we first know where child support sits. But beyond that, let's say you've been married long enough, you've been married 20 years, you make $150 a year, your wife makes nothing, or your wife makes $30 a year or something substantially less. Then you're in an alimony situation, based on the factors, based on Michigan law. You're looking at how much the income is, education, what's your wife's education background, does she have a degree that she's not using, or something along those lines, her health, her age, and you look at all those factors and you make some determinations based on those, but primarily it's driven by income and expenses. So we're looking at what do you make, what are your expenses going to look like after you're divorced, what does your wife make, what are her expenses going to look like after she's divorced, and you go from there. That's kind of the beginning, the top of an alimony analysis. So, and then because there's no exact formula for how to calculate alimony or spousal support, results can vary, right? We do seminars, we'll ask a panel of judges, give them a fact pattern, tell them these people are married 20 years, he makes 150, his wife makes 30, they had 2 kids, tell them the whole story, and we'll ask them to give us some guidance on what alimony spousal support would look like. You ask 5 different judges, especially if they're from different counties, you're going to get 5 different answers. There's just no hard and fast rule. There's no true guideline on what would be done to calculate spousal support or alimony. So that certainly adds to the complications. But there are some strategies. So what do you do if you're looking to avoid paying spousal support in your divorce? Well, she would start off, first of all, if you knew all this ahead of time, if you knew this before you were even going to get married, there's this disparity in income, disparity, you're making more than your wife does. It's later in life, maybe you're trying to protect some assets. Anyways, you do a prenuptial agreement. One strategy on avoiding spousal support would be to have a prenuptial agreement in place. You have a prenup, that's going to be valid if you get divorced. And if it says that you're not paying any alimony, then you're not paying any alimony. That would be one way to handle it, but usually it's too late for that kind of talk. So what else do you do? Well, one thing would be to argue fault. Fault is still alive and well in Michigan. You don't need a reason to get divorced, but that's different than saying the reasons for why you're getting divorced don't matter. They do still count. It can still be a factor. If your wife is cheating, she's committing adultery, or she's causing other problems, or drinking problems, drug abuse, whatever might be going on with her, you can raise those issues when you're talking about spousal support. You can say, yeah, well, I know I make more money than she does, but really this thing is all kind of caused by her behavior and her fault and things she could have avoided, and I shouldn't be paying alimony, or I shouldn't be paying as much. Fault is definitely a factor when it comes to calculating alimony or spousal support. So you don't want to completely ignore that in your situation. You want to look at the equities here. What's the fairness? What's going on here? Who's doing what? Who's the bad actor? Who's the one that's causing trouble? If your wife is causing trouble, committing adultery, seeing other people, whatever it might be, that makes her, it just means that people are not as sympathetic towards her position, and you're gonna get in a better place with alimony, spousal support. It doesn't mean you wouldn't pay anything just because she's cheating. Michigan isn't like that, but it certainly can be a factor, certainly can be something to consider. Another thing that works to your advantage is to know your case, know your budget. There's a form you fill out at the beginning of a divorce. Once you file for divorce, you get the other person served with papers. Then 28 days after the answer is filed, the response to the complaint, once that's done, you're both required to fill out what's called a verified financial information form. So you're both required to fill out financial information, exchange this information, and it's signed under oath. So you want to make sure that your financial information form is done correctly, accurately, full disclosure. Then you're the one that's going to look like you know what you're talking about. You're the one that's going to help set the narrative in the divorce case of exactly what you make, exactly what the assets are, exactly what the liabilities are. All too many times we see these things, they're sloppy, they're half done, they're not accurate, and then the other attorney is the one controlling the narrative at mediation, at any discussions about settlement, maybe even at trial, because they're the one with the credibility. Their form is more accurate. Clearly they know more about what's going on with expenses and incomes, and then the discussion is going to be led by them, and of course that's going to be to your advantage. So know your budget, make sure actual expenses are not being inflated by your wife or by your spouse. So make sure that that's not happening, and the only way you're going to know that is to make sure you know the bills. Get credit card statements, get monthly bills, get all that stuff ahead of time. Get it at the beginning when you're doing your financial information form. Make sure you're on top of it. You can say, well, look, she has $40,000 a year coming in, but her bills are only $3,000 a month. So alimony, it shouldn't be this huge number just because I make more money. When you look at what your wife's expenses might be, maybe that's more doable. So it's something to be looking at as far as how to avoid spousal support, or how to avoid paying too much is another way to phrase that. And you also want to look at potential income here. If your wife has a master's degree that she's not using, hasn't used for years, or even a doctorate or some other advanced degree, and she's making minimum wage or 15, 18 an hour with an advanced degree, there's something there. There's some income potential that's untapped. You want to be aware of that, be able to make some arguments about what somebody can make. A social worker with a master's could make 60 a year, and your wife's making 25 a year because it's just kind of where she's at this point. So you want to have all that taken into account. Make sure that not only just your wife's income, but also her income potential is being considered when you're looking at an alimony or spousal support case. So, those are some ideas. Alimony, spousal support certainly can be complex. It's a lower tier kind of analysis, meaning you got to figure out child support first. But once you know where child support is, you start looking at alimony and spousal support. And there's a lot of factors that can affect that. We're looking at expenses, we're looking at income, we're looking at potential income if she's under earning, we're looking at fault. Is she the one that's committing adultery and doing all these other things to cause the breakdown of the marriage, to cause the divorce? Those things can be considerations as well. So in a good way and a bad way, it's a complicated kind of discussion. It's not just plugging in some numbers in a formula, and attorneys telling you that they're misleading you. That's not the deal. And you'll know because you can say, well, why don't we use that in court? And if they know what they're talking about, they'll tell you these software programs that calculate alimony are not admissible in evidence. It's not something that anybody's even required to follow. So hopefully all that helps. Thanks.